Almost. Welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders and influencers who are making headway and some waves in their callings and industries. Today, I am pleased to be joined by John Bond, a publishing industry veteran with over 25 years of experience, and he has overseen the publication of more than 500 books. He's authored 6 of his own. Now, John's unique journey began as a librarian and educator before he transitioned into publishing, giving him a comprehensive understanding of books from multiple perspectives. He's the founder of Riverwinds Consulting and the author of the acclaimed Little Guides series. John has dedicated his career to demystifying the publishing process for aspiring authors. He reads approximately 100 books annually. So there's 52 weeks in the year, ladies and gentlemen. You can do the math. Just to stay current on industry trends, and believes that while getting published is achievable, it requires the right guidance and realistic expectations. Now, before I roll that intro, please share this with your friends and networks. From our analytics, we see that we have viewers across the earth, and we thank you for being here today. Come on in, have a seat, listen into this great conversation that I know many are going to enjoy. And just before I roll that intro, I want to thank those who've given us 5-star reviews on your favorite podcast player. And of course, I need to say thank you to those who ventured over to buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast and bought us a few cups of coffee this week and last. So we appreciate your support. Thanks for being here. And now I'll roll that intro. John Bond, welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast.
Michael, thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to our conversation, and thanks for the generous introduction. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I love the introductions to dig into the people's backgrounds and just be able to share the path that different people have been on to get where they are today. You know, when I was thinking of the name of your company, Riverwinds, it caused me, of course, to think of Badger and Frog and Wind in the Willows. Was there a book maybe from your young years that really impacted you, and maybe it was kind of a touchstone or a foundation point for your career?
Well, I have to tell you, the first book I can remember taking out of the library was the Guinness Book of World Records. And at that point, it was a pretty novel invention.
Yeah.
But nerdy John went through each page by page, looking at one crazy thing after another. And I really enjoyed it. And it was on its beginning journey. But I think the first book I really remember is a book by an author from the past, John Gunther, Death,
Okay.
Be Not Proud. And it's a really very moving story about a family that loses their child. So there's a couple early on memories, but I would not say they launched me on my career.
Okay.
My parents were fans of going to local house auctions,
Wow.
and we lived
Okay.
in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and right outside Bucks County is the famous town of Princeton. And we'd get to go to these auctions, and at the very end of the auctions, nobody wanted to buy books, so they would just buy 20, 30 boxes of books for $1, $5, $10. There was just a treasure trove to me and just really sparked my imagination. So I would go through these books, almost all of them well beyond preteen John, but I valued them and treasured them. And I think that's really what got me on my journey into the library and eventually into publishing.
Yeah. So your career path did take you from being that librarian to being that publisher, and that's a really probably a special path that you were on. And as you were transitioning from one to the other along that road of life, how did that actually also shape your perspective on what makes a book truly valuable?
Yes, it was interesting to leave the library and then to go behind the curtain and to see how that process or the processes takes place. And it made me appreciate the efforts that authors will go through, the hundreds, if not a couple thousand hours of efforts over the period of years to create their end, and then the commitment the publisher has, both financially and from a reputational point of view, to create that product. The thing I really started to value when I got into publishing was how, at the end of the day, quality sells. You can try to put out an average book. You could probably try to put out a quick book, but really the majority of times the things that last end up having to do with quality, whether it's a quality novel, quality textbook, quality medical book, quality self-help. Quality was really the key thing that I understood early on.
Wow, that's really interesting to be able to distill it down and understand that people want quality in their products. And especially in a world where we have AliExpress and we have Temu and we have Amazon and all of these things to choose from. And we know we're not getting quality in many of our purchases. So you've seen, you've overseen, I'm sure, the publication, as I mentioned in my intro, of over 500 books throughout your career. And I guess this kind of fits with my last question. But are there patterns maybe that you've noticed in books that seed commercially outside of that quality aspect, and then versus maybe those that don't regard their quality?
Well, maybe this is a way towards answering that. I published a lot in healthcare,
Okay.
and I think there were people that were publishing of the moment. In other words, something was happening then that was a pivot time in healthcare. And so what happened in that instance, they understood their book was going to be popular, but the world would move on because, as it all does, there's development after development. Then there were those books that were trying to encapsulate everything in a particular field, and they had a much bigger challenge to try to fit a size 10 foot in a size 7 shoe because they had to make the determination of what to keep in and what not to keep in. From my own point of view, when I created the Little Guide series, I tried to keep them very brief, very on point, very practical. What I ended up doing was realizing I could only have so much in there as well. So I had to say, was I trying to be comprehensive or was I trying to give practical tips? So at some point, you are saying, am I sacrificing quality because I'm trying to get down to the nuts and bolts of something? And hopefully, I was able to walk a tightrope, but that'll be up for readers to decide.
Right. And I know thinking back 20 or 30 years or so, I knew my wife at the time and I enjoyed writing. I had notebooks of stories and I was talking to you about how in my broadcast career, a lot of my writing endorphins came from the scripts that I was doing and, the leads and the tags and teases and all that kind of stuff. But I would say to her, you first write from the heart and then you have to get out the butcher knife. Kind of, and then you have to write from maybe the intellect or getting rid of the emotion. Can you speak a little bit into that writing process of how there's that relationship that the author has with the words that came out onto the paper, and now they have to dissect it?
Yeah, I would say if you got 20 writers in the room, you would find 20 different processes that they go through. Write it first thing in the morning, write as your schedule allows. Try to dedicate a whole day to, doing writing to stay in the flow. Do a little bit each day. So you're going to find a variety of processes. More generally, what you're speaking about, I try to suggest, depending on the unit that you're writing. Unit, I say it could be a short story, it could be a essay, could be a paper, could be a book, but try to get everything down as a first go around once. So everything is down. And then, as you said, you're going back to the editing or revising process and putting on a different hat or a different set of glasses to
Right.
mix my metaphors there.
Yeah.
So you're able to look at it in total. What some beginning writers start to do, and I'm going to use a novel writer here, for example, they get so excited about the story that they've laid out. Maybe they've sketched it all out from beginning to end. They'll write that first chapter. They'll go to write the second chapter, but then they want to make the first chapter more perfect. So they'll start to edit that first chapter. And there is some value in that. And that certainly has worked for some famous people over the years. But really, to try to get it all out there on the page is my best suggestion because it's allowing that story to sit and to percolate with you on the page and in your head. And as you start to go back, you'll start to see the things that don't connect or where you've been too brief or maybe too wordy.
Yes. Now, speaking of that writing process, have you come across, or maybe you've done this to yourself or in your own process of actually interviewing the characters that you developed in the book to ask them about what happened?
As a creative process, not as a publication process, you're saying.
Yes, that's right, as a creative process.
Yes. So when I think about the parallels of actors talking about
Mm,
taking a
mhm.
role
Yeah.
and they create this whole backstory that's outside the script to really give them self-grounding or a feel for who their character is, and sometimes they don't even share it with the director or the writer or whatever the case may be.
Gotcha.
Some authors, specifically in the fiction area, will do that same thing. They'll almost make a character sheet for the individual main
Hmm.
or middle of the road characters, not for every single one, but they'll go back and say, how do they react? What kind of a father or mother are they? Where do they come from a work perspective? What was their family history? So a lot of these things will help inform who they are, but not end up in the book. And I think there is something to that. Another way to approach it is to think about an exact person you know as a personality type and apply that personality type to a person in the book. So let me clarify that. Maybe my main character is a CEO who's going to lay off the people in his company, but I could use a person I know as a model for the rest of their life behavior. Maybe I don't know any CEOs. Maybe I don't know somebody that's to do that, but I know that they're either terse or they're kind with people. They are family oriented or they are sports oriented. So to try to take those people makes the character real, because when you start to think how they may react at any twist or turn, you're starting to think of what Jane may do or what Bob may do.
And so I've I gotta as we're talking, I'm thinking about back to this fellow. His name was Richard. We worked on some independent films together. We did some other stuff. He was a good writer, very creative fellow. And it was a Monday morning. We were doing something. I knew that he was working on this film script, and I asked him how it was going, and he said, he was very perplexed, and he said, "I've got this problem." I was like, "Well, what? Maybe I can help you with it." And he was like, "I don't know, Michael. I don't know. My one of his characters, we'll call her Gina, wearing a red dress, had walked into this field and was sitting in a tree. And he said, Michael, I don't know why she's in the tree, and I don't know how to get her down." And I was like, "Wow, okay, like you're writing the story, right, Richard?" And he was like, "I know, but," and so can you speak a little bit to that about the process of how, I mean, Gina got up in that tree and Richard could not get her to come down.
Well, I've done a lot more nonfiction writing than fiction writing,
Okay,
but I have
sure.
done fiction writing, and my
Yeah.
heart truly is with fiction writing. And I think you're the example you're speaking about, whether in a film script or novel
Mhm.
or short story, is really about that particular process. So,
Yeah.
what I'm a big fan of is having a sketch of the particular story or book to have the broad strokes of what it is, and then, I do a lot of walking. I'm at that stage of life where I really enjoy walk, whether it's good weather or bad weather. And although I do like to listen to books from an audiobook point of view, which is how I get to that number that you mentioned,
Yes.
I also like to go with just some quiet time and to just have the story inside your head. And I myself can attest to your friends or your colleagues'
Yes.
experience. Sometimes I'll be thinking through a story or a circumstance, and then something else will enter into it,
Yeah.
and I will give it credence that it's there for a reason. Sort
Yeah.
of like your brain is doing when you're dreaming at night, you're reshuffling the card catalog. I
Yeah.
feel like my brain knows my subconscious knows better than me, my conscious brain, and it's there for a reason. So I will think about that character, that in your example, the woman in the tree,
Yes.
or whatever has popped into my head, and I'm going to give it more credence before I dismiss it. So I think there's a lot of power in what your friend was doing and what people that do that process do.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to think about that experience and that conversation with Richard, and to think back now. I could say, well, Richard, you're really focused on Gina in the tree. My question was, she's wearing a red dress. What she's doing climbing a tree? And so we were so fixated, we didn't take time to look around the field in his imagination to say what got her in that tree. What else is there, Richard? But that's the delightful part, I think, about coming up with stories and being able to write and share imagination with
There's a
people.
very unusual play, I think from the 60s, maybe, Waiting for Godot, you may be familiar
Yeah.
with.
Yes.
And it's essentially 2 gentlemen, and I think there's a third one in the second act, that are sitting around waiting for a character, and they're arguing and debating and
Yes.
mistreating each other, And, there's a lot of similar questions there. Who's Godot? Why are we waiting for them? And I think we could
Yes,
make some analogies here to this woman in the tree, but I'm intrigued to
absolutely.
know more. If your friend has a copy of the book, I'd love to buy a copy.
Yeah, yes. Well, there's just something about the words on the page. And, however long humans have been able to scribe things out, fascinating to think of, like the Library of Alexandria and other places in our past. And I wanted to ask you just about the publishing landscape and how it's changed over the years, but I've heard that a lot of people still want books in their hands. Was there, getting to this point, maybe a significant shift maybe that you've witnessed, and how authors today could adapt to those changes?
Yeah, I'm a fan of the saying, all things change and we must change with them. And the publishing industry has been changing as long as I've been alive. To think that there was a time when there was no paperbacks, there was a
Yeah,
time when there was no dust jackets, there was a
yeah,
time when there was no title printed on the front of the book. So, I mean, these are all relatively recent inventions, late 19th century, early 20th, mid 20th century inventions. What's going on right now is just part of that change, adapting to culture, adapting to people's interests and wants and needs. At the beginning of the pandemic, it became plainly apparent people wanted paper books, and to an extent that's continued well beyond the post-pandemic and current era. So paper books were very popular and had a resurgence at that time. Even today, digital books or electronic books are really have a stronghold in very specific areas, and it's usually genre fiction. Now, some categories of books have been eliminated, and the best examples, of course, are encyclopedias or dictionaries in paper form. But by and large, most of the other paper books that we know of, so The Joy of Cooking,
yes,
or A Guide to Italy, or a Stephen King novel, people's preference usually is for a paper book, but there's a lot of great advantages to an electronic book or an ebook.
right.
About 10 years ago, I challenged myself to be more open minded to ebooks. And I said to myself, you know what I'm going to do? I've never read Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I'm going to read it on my phone. And to most people, that sounds like a prison sentence. But to my mind, I could increase the type size. I could put a dark background or light background, depending on the
Mhm.
time of day. And I read it in increments. And I got to tell you, there was little difference of experience other than my love of holding a physical book in my hand. There was little difference of experience with it. So I think it's just we're changing with the times. There's some good things that'll come from it. There'll be less than optimal things, but there'll be more benefits than not that come from it as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. And people still want to consume the written word. I wanted to ask you about your little guide to getting your book published. In there, you emphasize being realistic, which sometimes I can have a problem with, but what are some of the common, maybe, misconceptions first-time authors have about the publishing process?
Well, I think a common first conception is that people will not be able to do it. And I'm fairly optimistic and supportive of people that want to write a book. And I think most people have a book in them. So, from my point of view, if you are willing to invest the time and to be persistent, and feel you have something to say, most people will be able to get a book published in some form or another. Now, I've hit on some really key things there. If you're willing to invest the time, there is in our short attention span world no shortcut here to writing a book. You may dictate it into dictation software, but it's going to need a lot of work. You're going to need to sit down in a lonely spot in front of a computer and create your work. So that's the persistence. You're gonna need to have a stick to itness of this, you know what I'm trying to say, of
Yes,
being the persistent person that stays with the project. And then when it gets to finding a publisher or finding an agent, you're gonna really want to say, "I'm not gonna be turned away at the first negative thing that happens to me." So many times people think the first thing they write will be the first thing that will get published, and I try to remind them that the first time Serena Williams picked up a tennis racket, she didn't win Wimbledon. So there's something to the value of practice and repetition in your writing and learning from your writing experience. So I think there's some of the misconceptions that they have, that there's a shortcut or the first thing you write may get published.
Yes. So, to our listeners, there's a little call to action for you. If you've thought of writing a book or an article, feel free to tell us in the comments how your project is going. You can even tag John in the comments because he has a YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want some information, not only can you go to John's channel, but you could write a comment now and tag him, and he'll see that. Maybe the conversation will continue. So, one of the ideas that I was getting, John, from what you were saying is that question of the character or maybe the life changes that I have to make. And it's in your relationship with authors, were there some things, techniques maybe that you saw some people employ that you thought, oh, that's actually really smart?
Well, when I was publishing books in healthcare medicine, I had the privilege of knowing some of the best people in medicine and healthcare that were really high achievers. You would have these physicians that would be, getting up at 3 a.m. to write before they went in to do surgery at 5 o'clock, or people that would be, on a transatlantic flight that would write the entire time. It was really interesting to deal with the high achievers in every aspect of their life. As for regular people or people, everyday people,
Yes.
some of the techniques or some of the traits that I saw or somebody that tried to devote a little bit of time every day to getting better at their craft and to furthering their goal. So it wasn't just that there was going to be, as I said, one burst of energy. Somebody who said, I need to do this. I want to express myself and I'm going to pencil in time for me and for what's important to me every single day. And so that's one of the traits that I saw that were very, very valuable. You alluded to something, I think also somebody that digitally or paper-wise carried around something that allowed them to make notes. And I can remember years ago, pre-cell phone, when I would have a little piece of paper in my wallet of books that I was looking for when I went into the bookstore. Well, that quickly turned into Goodreads, and now I have that digitally. But just to have some notes app or small pieces of paper that you're able to make those notes throughout the day, because as things percolate, they're going to come to your mind, and it's good to be able to make those notes in real time.
Yeah. And I suppose that works actually as a practice for authors, whether they're in fiction or nonfiction or industry related books, where they have that notebook or maybe notes on their phone close by to say, that's a great question or a great analogy. I need to put that down
Absolutely.
and reference it. And I suppose probably having a good filing system in your mind or in that part of the process so that you don't lose track of those little nuggets. Was there maybe some helps or some tips on maybe cataloging your way through the book that you might have for some authors?
So first, I have to tell you, there's some great productivity apps that are out there for your phone, and you can simply search productivity apps, and depending on your
Okay.
platform, whether it's Apple or Microsoft, you'll find some ones that are appropriate for you. There are ways for you to make notes, have sent reminders to you, tie it into your calendar. So I would say the first thing is the productivity apps. The next thing is for you to understand this is your system and your system has to work for you. So for years, I would make small notes over fiction writing ideas, and they were everywhere. And finally, I came up with a simple Word document that sits on my desktop and is backed up to the cloud that I put in high priority ideas, medium ideas, and long term ideas. That works for me in my instance, but that's not going to work for other people. In regard to nonfiction writing, the big thing is when you're creating a nonfiction book and you start out, write a definition of what the book is, 3 or 5 sentences as to what the book is going to be. The most important thing that's doing is you're committing to what the book is and what the book is not. So that's really what's happening at the moment. Can things change as you move along your journey? Absolutely, they can change. But at the time, you're going to want to know what the route is that you're taking. And then as you proceed along that path, if you've broken things down into 5 sections in your book, 5 parts to your book, just start to slot those notes into the various parts that you're able to be able to keep some attachment to something that's connected to the book and not have it be a jumble of random thoughts.
Yes. Yes. So I want to ask you this other this let's say the question of modernity, if we could use that word, I think it fits, but going traditional publishing versus self-publishing, is there a framework that you suggest that actually helps authors make that decision?
Yeah, I'm going to add a third one there, which is in
Sure.
between, which is called
Okay.
hybrid publishing.
Okay.
So let's talk about self-publishing. The original idea was vanity press. It's no longer that. It's a very responsible industry. There are companies that can help you do it, and you can even work with Amazon through their Kindle service or a great service called Ingram Spark. That's true self-publishing. You write your material, get it set up in book form through through a partner or a vendor or a cottage industry situation, and then you simply upload it to them. There are really very low barriers to entry for you to get any book created. Now, it doesn't mean you're creating quality work, and it doesn't mean anybody's ever going to buy it or read it. On the opposite end is traditional publishing. So whether with Random House or somebody else, you submit your work to them, they give you a contract, you submit it, they get it edited, they take all the risk, they put all the money out there, and they try to sell the book or they try to distribute the book, and then you get a small royalty. People will give that short shift because they're like a $30 book, they sell it for 15 and I'm getting $1.40 out of it. It doesn't seem fair. Well, in my world, it does make sense because they're doing a lot, and you're happy to be with Random House or whoever. In the middle is new hybrid publishing, and that is where you pay the publisher their hard dollar costs. So you pay them whether to typeset the book or do page makeup, and maybe you pay for some printing expenses, and then you're going to make a much higher royalty. At the end of the day, what really matters is your willingness to connect with your readers and to promote your book. Gone are the days from 20 years ago when the publisher did all the marketing, all the promotion, all the distribution. So now the publishers, whether hybrid or traditional, are looking for a partner that's going to promote their book. You have to be interested in getting out there through your own means, connecting either through a social media channel or through speaking engagements or through being a guest on a podcast or being a
Right.
guest on a YouTube channel and to
Yeah.
help promote your book. Is it all on you? No. But what I would say is do not pick self-publishing if you are adverse to promoting your own work and you have no route to do it. Because you're going to sell 20 copies to your friends, but the work will not be a work. I always say if you write a book and nobody buys it, it's like the tree falling in the forest. Is it really
Yes.
a book at that point?
Yeah, right. Then you have to go back and rework it. Yeah. Now, what about the role of literary agents? Has that evolved, and is securing an agent essential these days, or are there alternatives?
So, first of all, for self publishing and hybrid publishing, agents are basically unnecessary. Agents are usually associated with traditional publishing and almost always with the largest publishers. So, there are a fair share of small, medium, or regional publishers or university presses that you could publish with that do not require an agent. But as for the most prestigious ones, Random House being an example, they are going to require agented work. You cannot submit unagented work to them. As for agents, I have a couple of suggestions for you. Anybody could call themselves an agent. I could right now, and I'm not. You could right now, Michael, and you're not. But you want to work with somebody that's truly an agent. If somebody is charging you a fee to read your book or to assess your book or to do anything, if they're charging you an upfront fee, they are not an agent. They are somebody that's an editor that's making money off of giving advice. So you should never pay an agent upfront. They make money off of when they sell your book and off of your royalties. So that's number one. Number two is there's a couple great databases. I'll give them to you, Michael, and you can put them in the show notes.
Sure.
They
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
they have high quality agents that are in there. There are some, I'm sure, that are not perfect. I'm not fully endorsing it.
Yes.
There's usually a small monthly fee. You could sign up for 1 month, see the ones that are in your area or field or in region that you want to connect with. It's very important that you know about the agent before you submit to them. I use the analogy all the time. If I have an idea for a cooking TV show and I submit it to ESPN, the sports network, and I get rejected, don't feel bad about the rejection because my idea is bad. I submitted it to the wrong person. I should have went to the cooking show. So with the agent, don't send your science fiction novel to somebody that does romances and self-help books. So that's the research you have to do. If they only want 10 pages example writing, don't send them 20. They are looking for a reason to dismiss you and to see that you do not follow the accepted standards. Agents are there. Only pick agents that are in your field, do your research, and only submit to agents that are willing to work in an agented way and not work off of a fee. They're a challenge to get, but I've known people that have gotten agents, and it's not a climbing Mount Everest situation.
Right. And certainly what you're saying leads us to understand that it's not just the work of putting pen to paper and getting the ideas out. It's actually that other side, the foundation almost of the future of the book. I do want to ask you, John, about book proposals could be described maybe as business plans for books. What elements would make a proposal stand out to, let's say, acquisition editors in today's competitive market?
It's going to vary from agent to publisher, what you need to submit to them. Most times, I'd suggest for a first novel, you have to write the entire novel, show it to friends, get it in final form before you ever consider approaching an agent or a publisher. I would also suggest it's worthwhile for you to create a book proposal. Many times, it's not completely necessary, but it allows you to fully understand your market, your purpose, and what role you're going to serve in it. But if you're creating a nonfiction book, you must create a book proposal. It's an industry standard document of about 25 or so pages. It is very beneficial to you, once again, for you to declare what the book is going to be and what the book is not. It's going to start out with an overview of what the entire proposal is. It'll have an extended table of contents where you'll list each chapter name and a short description of what it's going to be. It's going to talk about you as the expert you are in your field. If you're going to apologize and say you're not an expert and say, I'm shy and don't want to do that, that's the wrong thing for you because you need to sell yourself in this document. Next is you're going to look at the market. The market being you can't say everybody interested in cooking is interested in my book on cooking. You have to be more narrow over who your specific market is and more specifically how the publisher might get a hold of that market. More statistics in there, the better. Next is competitive and comparative books. So please don't say in your proposal, there's nothing like this out there, and there is no competition to this book, or this is the only book ever been written by like this. Not true. Reach out to me. Tell me why I'm wrong. First of all, your competition is to not buy your book. So right off the bat, you have to acknowledge there are other options that they could do. Give a one-sentence bibliographic entry of what the book is. It should be in print and popular, and then a 1 or 2 sentence description as to why your book is different or complementary towards it. And at the very end is something very important. I'm sorry to say you may not like this, but it's the author promotional platform. And that is how you're going to specifically promote and market your book. Once again, do not say, I'll do anything it takes to do this that the publisher tells me to do. They're looking for ideas you want to do, including appearing on podcasts, social media, speaking engagements, writing guest blogs. So that's what that document's going to be. To make it stand out first, have it be perfect. No misspellings. Don't have it be sloppy. Don't have it be vague. You don't want to be wishy-washy. You don't want to say, I can do it this way or I can do it that way. You want to be definitive in your vision to the book. So that's the important part. And another thing is to have enthusiasm and energy and have that come across in your pitch, in your hook that you're trying to have for the book. People want somebody who's excited about their topic and are willing to convey that through their book.
And it causes me to think of the old verse that says, "Write the vision and make it plain," so that the courier can run with it. But the other side of that is, I guess, inch by inch, it's a cinch; mile by mile, it's a trial. So it's really breaking these steps down, ladies and gentlemen, one after the other, kind of as we plant a seed. I got some garden plants that are not quite ready for outdoors, but it's a seed that goes into the soil that gets light and water, and it's one step after the other, and eventually the seed breaks through the soil.
Journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. In
That's
full
right.
agreement. Great quotes.
Yes. So I wanted to ask you, how can our viewers get in touch with you?
First, I welcome anybody to reach out. I do a lot on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can message me there. As you said, Michael, I got a YouTube channel where I have 100+ videos on academic and regular publishing. feel free to leave me messages through LinkedIn, through YouTube rather, or under any video. I see all those and I respond to 99% of them. I have a couple websites, River Winds Consulting with an S.com. And then I also have Publishing Fundamentals with an S.com. And you can learn more about the services that you have there. I welcome anybody reaching out to me through any of those channels or through email.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, John. It's been a great conversation. I can't believe the time has gone so quickly. But thank you for joining me on 5 a.m. today.
Michael, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and what a pleasure, what a great opportunity to be able to speak with you here. Great job.
Pleasure. Absolutely. It's so much fun where we can come and reason and talk together. And viewers, thank you so much for coming in and pulling up a chair beside John and myself and listening in. And, maybe this has caused a couple names to come into your head of, oh, I think Mary should listen to this or Alan. He would probably get a lot out of this. Feel free to share this with your friends and your networks because this will help some people get a little bit farther down the road. I don't think it's ever too late to start penning a book or a memoir, or if someone was a lifelong professional and said, you know what, I've always wanted to write this book about law cases or case studies in law. It's never too late. Am I right, John?
81% of people, when they were surveyed in the year 2002, 81% of the people said they had a book in them. And I'm fully in agreement over that. It's an achievable goal if you're willing to spend the time and be persistent.
That's right. Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Thank you so much for joining us today. I will give a couple reminders. If you could give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast player, we would appreciate that. And as I thanked them in the beginning, thanks to all those who've gone to buymeacoffee.com/5am podcast. We do appreciate your support and your interaction with us here at 5am podcast. So until next time, may you seize your day and make sure you get out and enjoy those sunrises and sunsets. I'm Michael Klassen.